Käthe Kollwitz spent her whole life refusing to look away. From war, from poverty, from mothers who cannot protect their children, and eventually from her own grief. You might think a life like that should break a person, but it didn't break her. So where does a woman like this come from? What kind of work comes out of such a life? And why, 100 years later, does her art feel more relevant than ever? In this tiny sculpture, everything Käthe Kollwitz ever refused to look away from comes together. A whole life of bearing witness pressed into 40 centimeters of bronze. This work, called Pietà, couldn't be more relevant today, and it also couldn't be more personal to the artist. And I think you can feel that in every fiber. I almost cried when I first saw it. The sculpture is showing a mother that sits on the ground, holding her dead son in her arms. His body leans into hers, his head fallen against her chest. Her right hand covers her mouth as if to hold back a sound that cannot be released. Her eyes are cast down, not looking at him, not looking anywhere. She's folded around him, her own body becoming a kind of shelter for something that can no longer be protected. The two figures are modeled from the same dark mass. You can barely tell where she ends and he begins. Everything in this work pulls inward, downward, into silence. Käthe Kollwitz makes the sculpture in 1937, after the First World War had taken her son Pietà. Shortly before her death, now living through the devastations of a Second World War, she writes, "The war will accompany me to the end." And it does. But it is not only war that shapes her life. Long before war ever comes for her, there's already something in her family, a fearless kind of honesty that Käthe grows up inside. It starts with her grandfather, who publicly rejects a creed of the church he cannot, in good conscience, believe. He loses his position as a result, and yet coins the phrase, "He who does not live by the truth he professes is the most dangerous enemy of truth itself." If you know something to be true, you do not look away, you do not stay silent. It is that idea that influences Käthe deeply, and that for the next 60 years she will keep circling back to. The same courage lives in her father as well when he does something very unusual for the 1880s. He sees his daughter's artistic talent and decides to support her in becoming a painter. And during her studies, around her 24th birthday, she reads a slim, fierce essay by Max Klinger that will mean a decisive shift for her whole life as an artist. In it, Klinger argues that painting belongs to the beautiful side of life, but that the darker, harder parts of life belong to the graphic arts, to etching, to lithography. And decades later, Käthe will extend that same conviction into sculpture. These are the mediums in which she goes on to make almost everything we know her for today. And her subject she finds in the most direct way imaginable, right where she lives. When she marries the doctor Karl Kollwitz and moves with him to Prenzlauer Berg, one of Berlin's working-class districts, poverty stops being only an idea for her. It is the reality unfolding right in front of her door. Hunger, illness, exhaustion, children marked too early by hardship. All of it becomes, for Käthe, the closest, most intimate material, and she will turn it into her life's work not to look away from it, but to make it seen instead. A cycle of 6 sheets called A Weaver's Revolt is the body of work that will make Käthe Kollwitz famous. What gives rise to the entire cycle is Gerhard Hauptmann's Die Weber, a play about the Silesian weavers. For generations, these men and women had starved at the hands of the mill owners. And when they finally rise up and revolt, they are shut down by Prussian soldiers. What Hauptmann has shown her right there on the stage is exactly what Kollwitz has been circling for years. That the lives of the poor, their suffering, their uprising, their dignity, can be the central subject of a serious work of art. And she understands that this is exactly what her own work has to do as well. To make this suffering visible, to bear witness to it, to refuse to let other people look past it. But she does not create the weavers the way a historian painter would. She gives them the faces and bodies she knows from Prenzlauer Berg. The same exhaustion, the same hollow cheeks, the same children, and the same mothers folded around them. What Kollwitz does is giving this event a closeness of something happening right outside her door. When the cycle is shown at the Great Berlin Art Exhibition in 1898, it is unlike anything German audiences have seen before. The poor are no longer in the background of these prints. They are the very center. And the closeness Kollwitz has built into them is not something only she feels. What is hanging on these walls is not a distant misery belonging to strangers. It is a suffering the audience already knows, the one happening on their own streets. And once you have seen it in this form, it is impossible to dismiss. And in the middle of all of this, she does not look away again. Only this time, what she's looking at is a grief almost unbearable to imagine for oneself. It is an intimate etching she calls Woman with Dead Child. A woman is seated on the ground. Her son is stretched across her lap, naked, already loose in death. Her face presses into the hollow above his shoulder, and every line on this sheet gathers him tighter into her, as if she could still pull him back inside the body he once came from. The blind, instinctive grip of a mother who has not yet decided she's going to let go. There's nothing arranged about the grief in this image. Kollwitz strips away everything the tradition has so often placed around the grieving mother. No grace, no distance, no consolation. The 7-year-old boy who sits as her model for this etching is Käthe's own son, Peter. What she does not know, what she cannot know, is that in 11 years, this exact scene, this exact loss, will be her own. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 will not only change the course of the world, but also, very deeply, the course of Käthe's life. Her son Peter, now 18, wants to enlist as a volunteer and still needs his parents' permission for it. His father refuses. Käthe hesitates, and then she says yes. It is a yes given out of love, and a yes she will never be able to take back. Only a few weeks later, on the 22nd of October 1914, Peter is killed. Imagine that moment. The yes she gave, and the son who will not come home. And still, Käthe does what she has done her whole life, only now against the weight of her own grief. She does not turn away. She begins almost immediately to work on a memorial for her son. 2 monumental granite figures. But for the next 18 years, she can't bear to finish these statues. Instead, she turns her grief outward. In 1922, she writes a single sentence into her diary. I want to make a difference in this time when people are so lost and in need. And that is exactly what she does. She makes a cycle of 7 woodcuts and simply calls it war. And in it, she does not show us battles. She shows what war leaves behind. The widows, the parents, and the mothers. Later, that voice is translated into something even more public. A poster with the inscription, Nie wieder Krieg, no more war. A young man, his hand raised in an oath, shouting into the open space. It is created for an anti-war rally in Leipzig. And from there travels into newspapers, onto postcards across borders, until it has become one of the defining images of the international peace movement. It is the loudest image she will ever make. And somewhere in the noise of all of that public work, something quieter becomes possible again. 18 years after Peter's death, Käthe is finally able to finish his memorial. She and Carl travel to Belgium, where Peter is buried in a German military cemetery. The 2 granite figures are installed at the edge of the field of graves. The mother kneeling, her shoulders folded forward, around the grief she has been carrying for nearly 2 decades. The father kneels beside her, his hands pressed to his body as if he has to hold himself together physically. It is her and Carl that she's depicting in those statues, facing the rows of small, flat gravestones. She doesn't know it yet, but this summer in Belgium will be the last quiet summer of her life. Because only a few months later, Hitler is taking power. And a woman who has spent her life speaking for the poor and against war and the Nazis is exactly the kind of voice the new regime will not tolerate. Within weeks, she's forced out of the Prussian Academy of Arts, where she had been the first woman ever elected. Her work is labeled degenerate, and she's being told in every way the regime knows how that she's no longer wanted in public. For decades, she has made her grief visible to the world. Now, silenced, watched, forbidden to speak, she makes something for no one but herself, and into it flows everything. The weaver mothers, the son across her lap, the kneeling parents in Belgium, a whole life of witness. Pietà. She also often calls it mother with dead son. And it is, in 3 dimensions, the drawing she had made 34 years earlier with her son Peter lying across her lap. What makes the sculpture so powerful is how ancient it feels, and at the same time, how unbearably personal. Looking at it, your mind goes immediately to the Pietà, to Mary with Christ across her lap, to centuries of mothers in stone and in pain, receiving their sons back from the cross. But there is no ceremony in Kollwitz's version. No distance, no promise of redemption. Only a mother, a dead son, and the grief between them. And then you notice she has done something no Pietà before her ever did. The son is not laid across the mother's lap. He's not being offered to us. He's folded into her body. And with that, the whole weight of the work shifts. Time has folded back on itself. The grown man war has taken from her has disappeared into the body of the small boy he once was. She's not holding a soldier, she's holding a child. And the longer you stay with this work, the more you notice something you might have missed at first glance. The face of the mother, the broad forehead, the heavy eyelids, is the face Käthe Kollwitz has been drawing into her own self-portraits for 40 years. She has not sculpted a mother. She has sculpted herself. All her life, her grief has belonged to others. This one is hers. Kollwitz's work is almost 100 years old now, and still, somehow, it feels as relevant as ever. Because the images that run across our screens today are exactly the images she spent her life creating. War, poverty, children suffering, mothers folded around bodies they cannot protect. But the images reach us faster now, more of them, and we have learned without ever deciding to look for no longer than 3 seconds, to scroll, to keep moving. Kollwitz's whole life is a quiet argument against that. She stayed with what hurt. She did not turn away just because turning away was easier. And maybe in a world that keeps moving, that is what her work still leaves us. The courage to stay.